There we go. Happy holidays, everybody. Welcome. You cannot avoid it being a holiday feeling in this room on this set, I think. Welcome. We're here tonight to talk with you and share the process we've all been going through in creating this version of A Christmas Carol. So thank you for joining us, even in the rain. The play has been something that I've worked on for a long time. I know the first play I think I ever did, actually. I played Jacob Marley in junior high school. So I've been doing it a long time. I did it at the Rep as an actor for many years. I directed it for them for 3 years. We opened this theater, this renovation, with the production in 2008. That was an adaptation that I did. So it's a play and a book that has a lot of meaning for me. And so I keep asking myself, why do I keep coming back to this play? What is it about this book and this play that I keep coming back to? And why do all this work? Why is this play such a lasting sort of piece? And I think one of the things that's most important to me about this story is that it depends on where you are in your life, that there's different parts of it float to the top and become more important to you. And one year it may be this thread, and one year it might be this comment or this idea. And so there's always something new in it, no matter how many times you see it. Every time I've worked on the play, it was a book first. But every time I start working on the play, I go back to the book and I read the book. It's one of the best books ever written. It's an amazing book. I could go on all night about the book and how the book was written and all of that. I won't, that's a different story. But the thing about the book is that different parts of it always leap out at you. So when you start looking at how are you going to adapt this story, one of the first things that you start to ask yourself is, what does this story mean to me this time? And if you go from that point of view, then the show is going to take on its own shape, a new shape. And so, there's been 3 incarnations of A Christmas Carol on this stage with Cygnet. The first one was in 2008 when we first opened the building. And at that time, I was very interested in the Gothic Victorian ghost story about it. And so the way that you edit the story out, pull all the parts you don't want out of it, you're left with the story you do want. And because you can't put it all on stage. You just can't put it all on there. It's too rich a book. And so that particular script was tailored towards ghosts and dark ghosts and scary ghosts and hard truths. And I love that part about the book, is that it's not just a Christmas story, it's a life story. And so that particular version took a dark tone to it, a Victorian tone. I wanted it to be very Victorian. And so when we were doing our It's a Wonderful Life, we did that for 6 years. It was a radio play. It was fun. People seemed to like it. And then after the 6th year, we thought, well, we've been doing that show a long time, but we really like the format. And maybe the format is what can be fun. So Billy Thompson, who is the composer of this show, he and I decided to try and turn that into a 1940s radio script. So that became all about multiple voices and sort of how do you create the visuals that go along with A Christmas Carol purely through the imagination and sound effects. And we had our radio guy in the corner, and the microphones and no costumes, really. It was all in the imagination. And I thought that went okay the first year. And I thought, well, you know what? It really wants to be funnier. Because you can't do a dark ghost story like that as a radio show, because we keep interrupting with silly commercials and all of that. So you're always breaking the mood, right? So I thought, well, I think this next year, we need to put more music in it and make it funnier. Find more jokes, more of a radio thing. So Billy and I added a bunch of music, which meant we had to cut a bunch of stuff to fit the music in. So slowly this story is evolving into this one. That's where this is going. The long way around, the detour. And so last year's production, I remember we were sitting there, I was watching it in previews, and I thought, you know, Craig Wolf, who did the lighting, did such evocative lighting. And the lighting was like, how do you turn a radio studio into a Christmas carol and still let it be the radio station? And so I'm watching the show and I'm taking notes, and I kept thinking, you know, I love the Christmas carol part of this, and now the radio is really getting on my nerves. You know, the microphones, we're stuck at those microphones. What I loved about what was happening with that script last year was that so much of it was in the audience's imagination. And since it's a show, since it's a story that's very visual, lots of magic and ghosts and things appearing and disappearing and all of that, well, in order to do that in a situation that's not a film, how do you provide those visuals without it being an extremely expensive production to put on? Some theaters do that. They fly the ghosts, they have people coming out of the ground, London was on a turntable. I mean, there's all sorts of different ways people try to solve the problems of bringing those things on stage. I loved the cleanliness with which we were able to bring images into people's minds through just the sound effects alone. And I started thinking, you know, what if we pulled out the radio stuff, took the script we had been developing, and actually turned it into a standalone musical? It would break us away from the microphones. We could stage it wherever we wanted. And that's just where we started. So I talked to Billy and said, we're going to need a new opening number because it's not a radio show anymore. We're going to need an intermission. We're going to want to have the end of Act 1, beginning of Act 2. We probably can goose up some of the numbers. We're going to turn it into a musical. So he and I started working on that. And so we started asking ourselves, well, how are we going to tell this story? And the things that I wanted to hold on to, this is like a mishmash of a lot of different Christmas carols that I've worked on. We decided to keep a lot of the sound effects. You see we have our little sound effects tables over here. And when we decided to do that, it meant that it was going to be a play that was about telling a story. And so in the book, Charles Dickens or somebody is telling the story of Ebenezer Scrooge. And so we would take that as the viewpoint of this production. We're going to tell the story of A Christmas Carol. We're not going to show it to you. We're going to tell it to you and let you fill in all the imagery. So we started thinking about, how do you create the imagery in the play if you were a kid in your bedroom telling it to each other, making props out of toys, and it started becoming about like the playfulness of the imagination. And so that led to the idea of puppetry. That we like, let's put puppets in here. I have 6 actors and a Scrooge. None of them are kids, but the children in this show are really important because the children are the future, Whitney Houston. But I didn't want to have adults playing kids. And so, especially the important kids. And so we thought, well, what if all the puppets are played by kids? I mean, the kids are played by puppets. And the puppets were not like cute puppets. They're not like, you know, cute little happy puppets, but like kind of moody puppets, like kind of cool, dark puppets. Because the kids in this play are all in trouble. One of the things that, I'm sorry, I'm doing the long Christmas Carol thing. I can't stop talking about Christmas Carol, I love it. One of the things about A Christmas Carol that I keep telling the cast is the play is written as an activist book. Charles Dickens wrote this book to provoke people into anger about the way children were being treated in coal mines. The book is written to get you angry about the plight of children. So he shows a lot of poor children, children living in poverty, children living on the streets. Ignorance and want are 2 children that haunt Christmas present. His purpose of writing this book, Tiny Tim, was based on a relative of his, a little child who had rickets from malnutrition, and that this was the plight of children in his day. He wanted you to read this book and get so angry that you'd go out in the streets and do something about it. And so it wasn't just a book about, isn't Christmas a wonderful thing? It was about Christmas is a time, as he says, when everyone sees each other as fellow passengers to the grave. That's a really amazing line, you know? Everyone is on the same journey to the grave. Treat each other with respect. It's not about a particular religious holiday to him. It's about a spirit of generosity. And so when you have all of these children in the play, how can we make them special? And that's where the idea of having all the children played by puppets came from, which then just triggered everything. And I think that what you'll see up here when you see the show is an amazing kind of blend of collaboration between a lot of different people's ideas and tastes, and it sort of became bigger than all of us. I think it was pretty exciting. I had the initial ideas about where it should go, and then as each person got into that idea, they brought their own thing to it, and the play now is sort of a sum of everybody, which I just think is fabulous. And these are the people who created it. So that's kind of the long story about how this show developed from that other one. I know that I know a friend of mine who's out there who thinks Christmas Carol might not be her favorite story, but I'm not going to even look over there because I don't want her to get embarrassed. But so it's been my mission to change her viewpoint on this book. And what's that? I'm not going to look. I'm not going to give her away. And so the thing that I really love to point out about this book is it's really not a Christian book in the sense that it's not about Christmas. Over the many decades that this book has been out, different parts of the story became more important based on what was happening in the world. Like I said, when it first was written, it was in response to industrialization and what it was doing to the poor people and the children. And so that was the focus. And believe it or not, when this book came out, Christmas was a dying holiday in England. No one was really celebrating it anymore. It was kind of falling by the wayside. And Charles Dickens almost single-handedly resurrected Christmas with his Fezziwig party. That party was written about a nostalgia in London and England for the 1700s when they did the big Yule logs, and it was a lost tradition that he was describing, and people said, "What happened to that? We used to do that, or Grandpa used to do that," and it resurrected this desire to celebrate Christmas. The book did single-handedly, and then of course when Victoria became queen, and Albert, brought the Christmas tree into the Windsor Castle and all that, so it became the Christmas we know today. That was what was important then. At the turn of the century, it was all about the big boss owner. The focus was really on Scrooge. Everything was about Scrooge, and what are the responsibilities of somebody who is in charge of the money in society? What are their responsibilities? In the Depression, the 1930s, and if you look at the movies of the 30s and 40s, the focus went to Bob Cratchit. What is the effect of a harsh owner on the middle class trying to survive with no money? And so that story that floated to the top, and it became all about Cratchit. And you watch those movies, and it's all about, they go to Cratchit, and it's like a 45-minute scene of them eating turkey. Because that's what they're focusing on. That's what people were going through. If you look at, like, in the 1980s when the movie Scrooged came out with Bill Murray, what is that about? How do you have a soul in corporate America? What do you do when your environment is turning you into somebody who can't see people anymore? So there's some way every generation has found the part of the book that means the most to them. And for me, it is about people dropping this sense that it's us versus them, Republican, Democrat, this or that, and everybody is on the same voyage to the grave, regardless of your political party or your whatever it is. And my hope is that people will, like I told the cast, I want you to finish this play every night with the audience running out in the streets, giving money to people and helping, and it's an activist story. So think about that the next time you're watching it, like, what is it saying to you? Why do we come back to it every year? It's to remind us to not be a Scrooge, and it's not about being a miser. That's not what it's about. It's about closing your back to society and your back to responsibilities to each other. That's what that play is about. Okay, so blah, blah, blah. Like I said, all night long, you can meet me at a bar, we'll go on.